broaden the definition of how you think of yourself in terms of being an artist. It's much bigger. It encompasses your life. I mean, Art2Life, you're an artist in your life. And all that means is you're carrying that question with you. What is the next step I need to take based on what I've done, where I'm at? What is the next thing? Lean into that, feel into that, whether you're standing in front of the work or not. So there's this flawed idea that we need to be working all the time. With the holidays here and all kinds of distractions, we sometimes stop our schedule of making art. And I know for me in the past, I felt bad about this. Like there's this guilty thing about I'm not making my art. And it took me a long time to get my head around why that is just crazy to feel that way. So I thought I'd share today with you how I think about this, because here come the holidays, and being able to take a guilt-free break from your art is really important for your practice, your happiness, your sustainability, all of it. Welcome to Art2Life, a podcast for the creatively curious. My name is Nicholas Wilton, and each week I'll help you rediscover not just the art of your life, but the art in your life. Join me as we explore that perfect blue at twilight, the wild frontiers of art making, and the extraordinary joy of finding your way as you go. And so here's some ideas that I have around this. The first has to do with definition of yourself as an artist. You got to redefine this idea of what an artist is. We think of ourselves as artists. The proof is in the things we make, and that we're an artist only when we're making something. And it's much better to think about it more from the perspective of you're an artist, and part of what you do is you make things. And this is something I try to help artists with a lot. It really has to do with the way you think about things, right? There's the thing you make, and we can focus on that. And when we're not making the thing, we can feel like we're not getting anywhere. But if what we're actually developing by making the thing is a way of thinking about the thing, it's the thinking that we're getting good at. It's the thinking that we're developing. It's the thinking that's evolving ourselves. And that in turn makes our art better. So we are interested in improving the thinking. And what's so cool is, in fact, you don't have to be making art all the time to be improving at this thinking all the time. And the thinking is more important actually than even the things you're making. So I love this question. And this is the question that we ask ourselves. I mean, it's a powerful question to ask ourselves when we're making our art, in the middle of it, but also when we're not making it. So this question, based on what I already have done or experienced in my art or where I am right now, based on what I've done, past tense, is the next step. So this is what we do in art. We have things happening and then we're trying to figure out what to do next, but we're looking at what we've done in the past, and that's usually like, oh, I put all this paint on the picture, or I've done this sculpture. Then there's the next step, and we look for clues to that next step by the things we've done. But if we carry this question with us when we're not in the studio and we're walking around, we still get answers. So it's the idea that that's what an artist is. An artist is someone who is making something and getting questions from that and evolving and developing and then asking, what is the next step? But if you leave your studio and you continue to think about this and you're primed and you're kind of carrying this intention, this question with you, what is the next step? I'm struggling with this. It feels too tight. If you're carrying that question, answers come in other ways that will evolve your art. So a perfect example of this, I was trying to think of when in my life this has happened to me. And it has to do with these workshops, which the Art2Life destination workshops, I call them now. But originally, the workshops were just a way for me to get out of my studio and go to some cool place and be around people because I was so lonely. That was my goal, right? I found that I was just staring at my work so much, and I often felt better if I could leave for a while and be around other people. So I came up with this idea of I could teach some people some things about art, and I started teaching these workshops. But that was the basic idea. I didn't have any big plans. It was just a way to get out of the studio. It sounded fun. And it was a specific place. It was Esalen, California, that I wanted to go. I never could afford to go there as a customer, as a person to participate in a workshop because it was expensive. But I wanted to go there nonetheless. And I figured if I could get there and be one of the teachers for 5 days, not only would I get to go for free, but I could, get paid to go kind of thing. So I went and I literally left my art and all the challenges around it that I was having always, and it was hard to think that I'm just going to stop making my art and go do this thing that seemed completely unrelated. But I had that question, where I was in my art, what's the next step for me? Why is this so hard? And I was really stuck and really struggling, and I'd lose clarity all the time. But anyway, I go to teach this workshop, and then of course, all kinds of things happen at the workshop. And one of the things that I learned pretty early on about teaching people in these workshops, and it has to do with how you start a workshop. It has to do with when people come into a room and they want to learn a thing and they're all new and they haven't met each other. There's a really important thing you do before you start working, and you go around the room and you talk to everybody about what they are after, what they want, kind of like a group intention setting, to articulate it to other people. And some people would be saying, I'm a mom and I just want to do something different. Other people were further along in their art making and they wanted to really figure out color or whatever. But what I noticed was when I did this, when I did a little Q&A, when we set intentions, when people set intentions for themselves, when they spoke out loud what it was that they wanted to achieve, the results were so much better. The progress people made was incredibly better. So what I learned from doing this thing that was kind of my art, but not really, I was leaving my art confused and not clear. And I was going and teaching this workshop and helping people and then learning about how to set intentions, how the power of that I learned that for myself. I learned that I needed to do that pretty often, like before I even started working on my pictures, like when I was starting a new body of work and I started doing that. And that more than anything was a huge game changer for my art. A little bit of clarity up front, even if you're not sure, just your hunches about it before you even start making art made a giant difference. So that's a perfect example of I have this intention. I'm walking around the planet wanting to do this art. I really want to do it when I'm standing in front of it, but I'm also wanting to do it when I'm not standing in front of it. And because of that underlying thing that I'm carrying, which by the way, that's called being an artist. That's why you're an artist all the time. This is what we're talking about right now, not just when you're making your art. You get information. I gained so much. That helped my actual art making. It changed everything. And I wouldn't have gotten it had I just stood in front of the painting, trying the way I normally do. I'll try this and I'll try that. And then I'll work tomorrow and I'll get up again and do it again and again and again. It was the break. It was the pause that made a giant difference. So broaden the definition of how you think of yourself in terms of being an artist. It's much bigger. It encompasses your life. Art2Life, you're an artist in your life. And all that means is you're carrying that question with you. What is the next step I need to take based on what I've done, where I'm at? What is the next thing? Lean into that, feel into that, whether you're standing in front of the work or not. So that broader definition of the way of being an artist, that's what moves you along. And that can happen in the holidays because it's beautiful to take a break. It's actually really, really, really important to take a break. And in my example, and I think you'll see the same kinds of things, you will improve faster. It's actually like a strategy to improve by taking a break. And then the second idea is that stopping allows this amazing thing called objectivity to come in. It's one of the most important components or ways of being. If you can be objective, if you can get out of the way of this thing that you're so obsessed with and be objective, it can really, really help. And you gain that by walking away. You gain that by being outside of the studio for a while. But again, I love questions. And this question that I use when I've left the studio is, what do I have too much of in my work? And the feeling, that can be a feeling, is it too playful? Is it too colorful? Sometimes when you can see a bit and you've got a break, you can discern better what is in excess instead of trying to figure out what you need. Because what you need is, you can't see it oftentimes. But again, you're looking at what you've made. It's all in the past. You don't need to be making anything. You can carry that feeling with you. You can look at a photograph of your art on your phone and ask yourself, what do I have too much of? And that is a really great way, because when you have too much of something, you don't need all of it. And it's taking up space. It distorts. If you have too much of something, it's excess. It's like having too many pairs of shoes, or it's like when your bag when you're traveling, so you have too many clothes. It slows you down. It just gets in the way of everything. And then once you can let something go, of course, then the work becomes more clear. You become more clear about what you actually do need. What's left, if you can remove some of these things, it becomes more clear what you need, right? If there's a room full of things, but if you get rid of most of it, it's really easier to see, oh, I need a couch there, or I need this, or what's missing. So a really great question. What do I have too much of? I remember when my children were quite small, we visited a Cambodian refugee camp, and it was an amazing experience. And we just went to do art with them and be with them and help them. And it was a charity that we were kind of involved with for a while. And it was amazing. These kids, there was this huge garbage dump. I mean, like 6-acre garbage dump and these children had lived there. There's many homeless kids that just survived by picking through the debris. And these kids were all rescued from this garbage dump. And they lived in this orphanage. And they were this enormous family. It was quite amazing. And all these kids got along so well. The little ones were taken care of by the slightly older ones. Like, they were all parenting each other. And they never argued about anything. It was amazing to be around kids. Like, they were so grateful that they had each other, and it was an amazing experience. And we did an art project with them, and I'll never forget it, because we did story making with them, and we laid down on the floor, and my kids were there, and we brought all these art supplies, and we made these books, and these kids got to do stories. And what they had in excess, was, they had all their family was massive. There was 100 children, all different ages. And they had tons of kids around them, and they had tons of activities, and, they all ate together, and there was a lot of love, actually. And it was kind of amazing. But when we sat down to do stories with them, what they started to draw almost across the board was a home. I mean, a place for themselves where it was just them, or just them and two parents, or them in their room. Like, they don't have that. They didn't have their own space. They had so much. From the outside, it looked like these kids just had this incredible family. But what they really wanted was the opposite of that also, which was a little place that was their own, that nobody kind of came in. It was like a room. They wanted a little room, and they would draw these little houses and these little rooms, and one parent to look after them or two parents to look after them instead of this collective thing, And it was really not apparent to me because they had this huge abundance of a certain kind of thing. So that was just a way I started thinking about this. They wanted the opposite of that. That's actually what they needed. And it wasn't apparent until we worked with them. It was just kind of a perfect example of, and we can do this in our art. We have way too much of a certain feeling, and we can feel that, and we can look at it and say, well, what can I give up some of that to bring something else in? What would make this art or this life? Because it works in your life too, right? If I have, if I'm tired all the time, what do I have too much of? I have too much of activities and people and things. And, and it's like, maybe if I stop doing a few things and let some of that excess go, could bring in something like sleep or reflection. This is a beautiful question, what do I have too much of? And the idea that we crave the opposite of that, it works in your art. It works in your art just in thinking about it when you look at a picture of it, but it also works in your life, like those children in Cambodia. So trust that there's ways that you can improve, right? Things can happen in your work that your different ways of improvement happen when you're not in the work, when you're not physically making it. Important things, major breakthroughs, almost all the breakthroughs that have occurred for me came out of giving up some things. There was something that was too much of, or something was taken away, and there was a problem that was solved. And that's where the breakthrough came from. And we're talking about breakthroughs in your art, things that you're really after that when you're standing in front of it. But this can happen away from the work. So this third idea is around that we're looking for new kinds of answers, new things to come in that wouldn't normally come in the normal way, right? Not all the solutions, not all the breakthroughs happen standing in front of the work. So I remember one of the most powerful things I learned that helped me in my art. I remember I couldn't do my art for too long, too many days in a row, because it would kind of wear me down. And especially if I wasn't like selling anything, or I was just in a patch where I was mostly by myself. I mean, that's why I did those workshops, right? There was a vulnerability that I felt vulnerable in doing this. I mean, when you're making your art, I now know that's a necessary part of when you do this authentically, there's a vulnerability that is part of it, that's required. But that used to wear me down. So I had to kind of limit my art making to, a few hours. I just couldn't do it for so long, for so many days in a row, because it would just wear me down. Sometimes it would go really great, and then I could just do it all day. But usually I was not very satisfied. And, I was working hard trying to improve it. So I had a powerful experience that gave me a strategy to alleviate this. And it didn't come from working harder. It came in a teaching situation outside of my studio completely. And it came through helping somebody. And what happened was I was teaching a workshop, and everyone feels pretty vulnerable when they start. And I'm in a room with 15 or 20 people, and I'm going around helping people. And it's usually on the second day, and people are trying to get this thing going. And it's really easy. I know you know this if you make art, to compare yourself to other people, but it's especially easy to do that when there's other people in the room. When you're looking at other people's art in the same space. In fact, sometimes people say when they come to a workshop, I've never made art in front of people. I hope this is going to go okay. And what they're talking about is like, it's pretty distracting. Someone's over there and look what they're doing, and you get distracted from your art. But anyway, I could kind of feel the room, and, okay, he's doing pretty good and she's happy over there, I can tell, but there was one person in particular on this day who wasn't Yeah, I could tell she was just struggling because she wasn't painting and she was looking around at everybody's work. And I kept meaning to, she was in a corner of the room and I was trying to get to her, but people kept asking me questions and I was helping and I kept my eye on her and I couldn't get to her. And then I kind of forgot and I was helping somebody. And then I heard, I heard this the brushes put down kind of hastily and it made a clump on this table. And I looked up and I saw this woman get up. And she was just completely frustrated and she snapped everything shut. She grabbed her bag and she started walking out of the room. And when somebody does that in the beginning of her workshop, then she was crying. There were tears. She was really upset. Like she had just really had it. She was done. She was out the door. And I couldn't run over to her and say, hey, what's wrong? Because, you're just going to draw more attention to her. And she got to the door and I couldn't see her, but she was getting to the door and I was thinking, God, what can I say? What can I say? I don't want to say, hey, Marcia, what's wrong? That's not going to work. But the door's opening. I hear it click and the door's opening. And so in a moment, I just yelled out kind of to everybody in the room. I just said, you guys, I just want to hear what's hard for you. What's hard? And everyone kind of looked up and so people started sharing what was hard for them. Like, well, I'll tell you what's hard. I can't get this color thing. Everything I do, I don't like it. Another person raised their hand and said, I don't like painting in black and white. And I feel like I'm much better in color. And you're asking us to do black and white. And another person said another thing. And another person said another thing. And the door, she was behind me. I didn't want to turn around and ask Marcia what was hard. But there were people telling all of us, and she was behind me and the door was open and she was standing at the door and people were sharing what was hard for them. And I couldn't believe it. And she's like, she's still there. And people were really sharing what was hard. It was kind of, it was a lot all kind of coming out, but everyone was just talking about how they were struggling too. And then Marcia, she said, yeah. And she elaborated on somebody's challenge. And as she said that, I'll never forget it. She closed the door and she came back in as she was talking. And she sat down at her seat and was sharing what was hard. And she was back in. And it was a huge lesson for me about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability. Like we need it in our art, but the workaround is that it's really helpful to share with other people, to understand that other people are going through it too, not to try and be like a silo all alone and go through this stuff, to do it together, to share what's hard. And this works. I mean, that question, what is hard, is a beautiful one to ask people when you're out in the world or around other creatives, what's hard for you? And start as an entree, because I'll tell you what's hard for me. I don't like painting by myself all the time, or it sucks when I don't, use that. That's such a great prompt. And that idea of learning to share the hard stuff that I was going through in my practice, for me, I learned this that day. It also was a kick-ass way to help people in workshops, but it was mostly helpful for me. That then I could then be more sustainable in my art practice and I could stay at it longer, because we all go through this, actually. It's always hard. And it's just garden variety. There's vulnerability. Now I don't really care so much. And I coach people this. And this is why I'm sharing it with you, because this is something that, that learning didn't come from making art. That learning came from being around it and taking things that I'm getting. There's answers come to you, not always through the actual process of art making, that you're an artist and you carry this intention with you. And it's pretty incredible that how much you can progress, even more than even making your art sometimes. So I just hope that this holiday season, that you take a break and you can do it in a guilt-free way, and that it's not about those 2 or 3 paintings that you didn't finish. It's about the bigger picture of your evolution as an artist, the growth of who you are and who you're becoming, which has a much, much bigger impact on the kind of work you're going to make now and in the future as well. So anyway, I hope that was kind of helpful for you. All right, you guys. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about color, I've got a really cool download where I've gone into a bunch of aspects of color. You can get it at colortipspdf.com. It's free. You can download it. And I think it could be a really helpful way of a new approach, a new way of looking at color that can really, really help your color and art so much. Listen, thanks so much for being here. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review, or even better yet, share it with a friend. I'd super appreciate that. Again, thanks so much. Okay. Hey, thanks for listening to the Art2Life show. If you enjoyed the podcast, please help me get the word out by sharing it with your friends on Instagram at Art2Life_world. The recording of this and all episodes, along with a place to leave comments, see additional photos, and discover a whole new approach to making art, can be found by going to Art2Lifepodcast.com. And secondly, if you could leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on today, I would super, super appreciate it. It makes a big difference. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my artist list, every Sunday morning I send out a video blog all about art making. Go to Art2Lifepodcast.com to sign up. And all these links are in the show notes, of course. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.